Neck injuries, concussions, what to do about it? Can you do anything about it? Episode 54 of the Strength of America podcast. Stay tuned.
The Strength of America podcast.
All right, guys, welcome back. With football season coming in now, soccer, so much going on. Football, as we're working with a lot of the younger athletes and stuff, we're seeing that numbers are going down in enrollment. And I know a lot of that is due, as we talk to them about, parents are worried about concussions, which is understandable about that. However, there are things we can do about it. We can tell you that, number one, the protocol for concussions is so much better than when I was back in school. When I was back in school, what we used to do is we had I remember that med kit that they had, this old metal toolbox they'd open up, and there were always ammonia tablets that were just taped to the top of that. So you ring your bell, they'd come over with that ammonia tablet, snap it, put it under your nose, and eyes were a little more clear at that point, and that means you were good to go. You were back on it. So we had some real issues back then. That might have been some of the problems we have now. But anyway, leading to it now they do a testing with all these kids, which is fantastic, that they'll take them through a series of tests, motor skill tests, but also written and question answer tests that they'll do. And they want to see where they're at, how long it takes them to answer something, how long it takes them to do a movement. Then if there is an issue where they think there's concussion possibilities, they can run them back through that testing. And unless they come back at equal or real close to that point, they're not allowed to participate again. So I think it's fantastic we're actually doing something about that. But to me, like always with our training, it's about prevention of it. And we know there are things that you could do. And one of the biggest things for our football players, for example, is get the coaches that really help you with tackling, how to tackle, where the head position needs to be. We're not just using the head as a battle ram going into them, but paying attention to how they progress into that is so important on keeping them healthy. And you can't eliminate everything, but some of the biggest things are get the right coaches out there working with them so they know that they're spending a good amount of time on the technique of it. And even once that initial time is done, they still are reoccurring throughout the season. They still got to remind them, just like our speed mechanics. You can't just teach them, okay, you're good to go. You have to remind them they're in the game. Things are happening. And unless they pay attention to little things, that things are going to happen again.
Yeah.
What do you see over at the school? How are they on watching for concussions and things? What do they do?
Well, they're pretty good at watching through. Concussions are tough because a lot of it is going to be kind of what the AT thinks. It's never like a clear black and white. Okay, you have a concussion. Sometimes it's in a gray area and you don't know. So then it has to come down to the AT's judgment. With that said, on top of thinking about starting with the tackling, especially starting them younger to learn how to tackle, that's when it's huge. It's just like we talk about younger kids and teaching them how to move, how to squat, how to hold squats, and it's teaching them body awareness and body position. That's when they soak it up like a sponge. So you got to think later on, if they're not doing it right, it's going to take a lot of repetition to build that muscle memory of how to tackle, how to get the head out of the way. Our coach at Chandler Prep, Coach Goodman, does a great job at breaking down and having regressions and progressions for tackling and getting them to understand that, hey, we got to leave the head out. So it's huge, and it helps out a ton, And as we're going through outside of that, we're also thinking about, all right, next, on top of that, to supplement, how do we help reduce the likelihood or build the resiliency up to where we don't have to worry about as many, or having concussions if you can. But we're talking about neck training. And a lot of people think the old school just working in extension and different things. And, they started to find out that we got to work in lateral flexion also. We got to work flexion. We got to work extension. We got to work rotation. And those things are tough. But now we're also starting to see more people train it kind of like we would the core or a pillar, and having people do various drills that stay stiff through the neck and hold it like a pillar. So having somebody hold their head and having them lean at an angle and stay straight. And now they're working on stabilizing from all four sides, whether it's front, back, or lateral there. But now it's not just treating it and working it manually there, but it's another way to think about training the neck. So there's that, but there's also I've heard a lot of post NFL, and a guy who's post NFL and does a lot of strength and conditioning. He's talked about nutrition and hydration and sleep playing a huge role that now they're finding more of. And if some of those things are poor, or if your buckets aren't full on those things, you're going to find a higher likelihood of getting a concussion if you're not taking care of those things. So it's got to be a holistic approach. We can't just blame it on one thing, but we have to go across and check our buckets and see if things are pretty empty. That might be a good reason why maybe we're coming across concussions or different things like that.
Talk about buckets, making me think of Kentucky Fried Chicken. I don't know how that came from.
I don't think that'll help you with not getting a concussion.
Probably not, but it just got me off on that one. Sorry. All right. Yeah. And that's, the key he's talking about is, having great coaches that understand the fundamentals of tackling and moving. And then nutrition and hydrating. Again, the more we are in that stage, we're really less likely to have injuries because we're better focused in that, because we're hydrated, we're eating, we're getting our sleep the way we need to be. So it comes back to that part of it as well. But don't want you to think this is just football players. We're seeing a high rate. Now I think it was Philadelphia Children's Hospital. They came out with an article that talked about there's about 118% increase in concussions in female athletes also. We're having so many of them happening. We still have more with the male, but a lot more of them now are happening with female. And if they look at it, I think it was a rate of now with the men, it's about 17 per 1,000 athletes training, playing sports are having concussions. And women now are almost 14 in 1,000. So the numbers of them are increasing quite a bit. Where it used to be 6, but over a 10-year period now, we've more than doubled those numbers, unfortunately, with women as well. And a big part of it is neck strengthening. They don't do something specifically to strengthen that. And yes, our shrug pulls and all that work in there is real important to build a good base. But the lateral movement or lateral change of direction, controlling that melon so that the body's not snapping back and forth. We're training everything at the same time. The stronger that core is, the less chance we've got the head snap moving into it. The more we can work with our range of motion and in that mindset. If you're not on Instagram, make sure you follow it, because throughout the week we're going to do a daily neck stabilization, working on how to do strengthening for it, what kind of flexibility you should have, testing protocols, different things we're going to do as well on Instagram. So make sure you're looking for that this next Monday through Friday. But strengthening is an essential part for me, because the stronger the athlete is and they have good technique, the less chance they have of injury. And that's where we want to reduce that more than anything else. And it's not just that helmet that we had or even the pad that they put on. It's that brain shifting inside of the skull, because we don't have proper strength stability. So we've got an exaggerated motion. That exaggerated motion is just slamming that brain back and forth. And that's what causes the bruising and the problems that gives us concussions. So that's really a stable, real important part that we've got to keep in, is keeping them strong. And our female athletes, whether it's our volleyball, soccer, anything, that hard movement, they've got to be strong. So make sure you follow those on Instagram this week so you can see what's happening.
Yeah, that's good. And that's something I've started to notice the past couple of years at my school, is that we're starting to run into more with soccer and basketball, whether it be male or female. But we started to have more concussions come about just from getting hit with a ball and different things like that. So I think nowadays, and of course I've had some in wrestling, but that was when I got them. It was definitely when I was sucking down weight, a lot weaker. That's a whole nother story. But again, it comes back to the strength aspect of it. So I think we're just finding out more that we got to be resilient. And if we want to be resilient, we have to be strong. I can't have a bobblehead neck. I can't be weak, because then my head is just going to flop everywhere. So kind of like my core we're talking about, and now people are training the core more days, is to resist against motions and movements. Okay, so think of more planks, but now starting to add rows with the plank to add a rotational force that you got to fight against, or Paula presses, those various things. But now we're starting to think of the neck as the same way, that it's got to be able to resist motion. So I got to have the foundation and the manual stuff to get it strong and build a base. But also with that, we got to think about now, all right, how do I think and treat my neck as a stabilizer to resist against motion? Because if I'm getting hit, I don't want to move with it. I want to be able to hunker down and be able to fight against those forces. Once I get that hit, take that whiplash effect, if I'm not strong, then it's going to be a higher likelihood of something to happen. So we're just finding out a lot more, and we're finding out more that definitely that nutrition and some of those aspects play a big role. And we're starting to find out, and I've heard from another guy post NFL, as he took the idea of cycling through diets, kind of like periodization with training. but he'd cycle through, and they started to find that cycling through the keto, not necessarily staying on it, but just cycling it through, helped kind of heal the brain. So, I'm not saying go on keto or anything like that. I'm just saying that they're starting to find a lot more research now and different things that are helping people with some of these issues. So there's a lot going on.
Yeah, it's just the whole thing is having a good diet. If you keep that centered all the way around with your good carbs, your proteins, hydrating well, your body can handle a lot more stress and things that are happening at it. And I think more than anything, we want this episode more to not scare you off from these sports, but really realize don't just stop just because things happen out there. You do the job as a parent to take the extra step. That's fine. You're signing up for football or soccer, but how many of you are actually asking questions of the coaches, finding out what protocol they have? How much time do they spend on teaching tackling drills? How much work do they do in soccer or anything on strengthening for the neck and rotational work and making sure the athletes know about hydrating and eating properly and getting the sleep? Or are they just talking about just the sport and training and just playing all the time? So if you want to do that, talk to these coaches. I know our coaches that we work with at the high school level or even the monsoons on our younger youth sports, those coaches spend a lot of time on tackling and movement. And that's the same with some of the soccer coaches we work with as well. They've got to have the movement patterns and make sure the kids understand it's more than just playing. They have to do work on top of that to get ready. And I think the strengthening part is important to put into the practices. However, don't do your neck strengthening work just prior to playing. If you're out there on the field and you do your warm-ups and then we're doing all our neck strength and resistance work, and now we work on tackling drills, you fatigue those muscles of the neck. What's going to happen when you go into that hit and you miss hit with a tired neck? Afterwards is a great time. If you want to do the neck rotations and some of the light resistance things, that's great to activate and get them ready to work. Awesome. But don't do those exhaustive muscles where they can't move anymore and then go out and tackle. That's not what we want to do. At the end of it, like when we do our static stretching at the end of practice, we're our most warm, we'll get the most out of it. The same with our strengthening, work through that position. Or earlier in the day, you've got an hour or two rest time, that's fine going out into it. We just don't want to do it just prior and then get up and start working on tackling. So make sure you follow the Instagram. You have anything else going on for them? Instagram, the SOA podcast. Look for the daily work coming up this next week for you. Please share this with other parents and coaches that are concerned about concussions and keeping their kids safe. Male and female, any sport. Let's do what we can on top of this to help keep them safe so they can play longer. And as always, any questions, holler at us, comment below, and let us know things that you've had, concussions in the past, problems with coaching or different things happening, or solutions that were out there to help make it easier for that transition so you don't feel like you're battling with a coach. You're there to help them kind of lay the groundwork and help keep these kids safe. Appreciate it. Thanks again for being part of the Strength of America family, and we'll look for you this next week on the next podcast.
Awesome. See ya.
Thanks.